Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, host and head bookologist here at the Get Literate podcast. I'm a book-loving, notebook-hoarding reader and writer on a mission to change lives one book and one notebook at a time. On this podcast, we explore the power of bookology and leading literate lives. We talk all things books and reading and notebooks and writing, mixed in with mindful practices and creativity to create lives we love. You can expect regular weekly episodes focused on 3 books you need to know about on a bookish theme and how to bring those themes to life in our actual lives too. You can also expect author interviews, notebooking inspiration, and topics to help us grow through what we go through and take inspired action to make our lives better. So grab a notebook and your TBR list and let's get literate. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Get Literate podcast. So most of you listening know that I choose a one-word theme to guide my reading, my writing, and my living every single month. And this month for August, that word is nature. We are reading books about nature and how we can better connect with nature for our health and well-being. We're reading fiction novels that are set in naturalistic settings and have characters that embody a natural life. And we're even reading poetry and viewing photo essay books about the beauty of nature. But there's one book that I chose to feature right during the first week of the month in my bibliotherapy book calendar because of the connection to the theme and the ability it has to teach us so many life lessons through it. And that book is The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. And today's special guest has a special connection to the book and the author. So Keri Wilt, welcome to the Get Literate podcast. We've been talking back and forth about doing this episode for a while, and I am so excited to finally have you here.
Oh, me too. Super excited.
So why don't you start by telling listeners who you are and where you are and what that special connection to the Secret Garden is?
Absolutely. So my name is Keri Wilt, which is ironic, right? That's my married name that I married into the word, which is basically the opposite of what the Secret Garden actually becomes, which is a blooming, beautiful place. My last name is Wilt, right? That irony is not lost on me. And pardon me, I tell the listeners, I don't normally sound like this. It is ragweed season here in Texas, and I have a ragweed or whatever that thing is wrapped around my throat. So pardon all the coughs and the things in between. But basically, my connection to the Secret Garden is that Frances Hodgson Burnett is my great-great-grandmother. So I like to describe it this way because sometimes that even feels very far off. But Frances had 2 sons, Vivian and Lionel. Lionel died at almost 16 of tuberculosis. Galloping consumption was what it was called back then. Her other son, Vivian, was my great-grandfather. Vivian had 2 daughters. My aunt, great aunt Dee Dee, who had no children. The other one was my grandmother. We called her Granny. And of course, and then she had my mother, and my mother, pardon me, had me. Of course, that's the way that works. So I would say like she's my grandmother's grandmother. I think that helps kind of make that connection a little bit more. And really, my mother was kind of was really the keeper of FHB, which is what we call her in our house. I don't know. I don't know about everybody else who's listening, if you have children, but you know that if you have more than one child, they rarely get called by their name. I know I got called by both of my brothers' names, plus the dogs, and then mine. So to say Frances Hodgson Burnett in a household with already kids and dogs and all the things going on, my mother just was like, FHB. We're calling her FHB. This is what we call her. And so, but my mother was really the one who finally recognized really Frances's importance. And that's an interesting story because my grandmother, really one of 2 grandchildren, Frances's grandchildren, never really spoke about Frances. And that is because her father was her son, and imagine what it's like being the son of someone who is uber famous.
Yeah.
I try to explain to people that Frances was like, Oprah, of her day. Like, she couldn't go out in public without being hounded by the press. She led this very, very, very public life. And what do you do if you're the kid of somebody who is in the light? Most of the time, they retreat and they become very, not shy by any stretch of imagination. Actually, he was in the publishing business, but he did not want to be under the shadow of his mother. Even so much so, moving to Colorado, a place that she actually couldn't go because her health was failing and she had some heart issues. So the what do you call it? The elevation there didn't allow her to go, and so he could be in the publishing business, and people didn't know who he was connected to.
Wow.
So, so my grandmother really, she knew that Frances wrote some books, but according to her, like Frances was just Nanda. Nanda was what she called her. It was her grandmother, and she knew that they lived off of her wealth, but didn't really have any understanding of the breadth and depth of it because her parents really didn't talk about it. They just they went about their daily life. So when my grandmother and my grandfather got a divorce when I was 3 years old, a box, actually several boxes, landed on my mother's doorstep as a part of the divorce. My grandmother just thought, well, maybe Penny will want some of this memorabilia. And in those boxes, my mother literally just kept taking things out, and one by one realized, like, oh, wait a minute, she wasn't just someone who wrote some books. She was someone.
Imagine the emotion, the oh my gosh, what's happening right now?
Yeah, and even and you also have to think about it. Like back then, this was like card catalog days in the life, right? So this was there really was no internet at this point, and so really what happened was in the process of kind of all of that, Mom hooked up with some people who ended up writing biographies about Frances and really helped my mother do a lot of the work that it took to really uncover her life. And luckily she wrote a ton of letters. She actually, one of the fun facts about Frances is that she actually crossed the Atlantic 33 times over her lifetime.
Wow.
And that really was because the copyright laws in England, you had to be physically in the country when your book came out in order to have the rights to your profits.
Wow.
So she did that. But what do you do when you travel? At least what did we do back then, right? You wrote letters to your people. So we had tons of letters that really helped to tell her story and to tell her life. And she led a crazy one, an amazing, awesome, prolific life.
What a legacy in that stack of letters. I love epistolary novels. I love letters. I love the old-fashioned letter writing. So gosh, the family history that is in there in her writing, right? These aren't typed letters. These are beautiful old paper, old school writing. Oh, it's wonderful.
And it's funny you said it. So she wrote in Spenserian script, which I don't know if your listeners have any idea what Spenserian script is.
I don't.
But it's awful. Like it's like, think like calligraphy, but like maybe a doctor wrote it. Like it's super slanted. And so we've actually, one of the biographers had she worked at Dartmouth and had a bunch of her students like help translate a lot of them. Like you can kind of follow along and then you're like, I have no idea what this word is, like no clue. But so she hand wrote everything. She wrote 50 books, I'm sorry, 1,000 short stories and 15 plays over her 57-year career, from the time she was 18 until the time she died. and all of them were handwritten. Even though typewriters came out, she refused to use a typewriter. So they were all handwritten.
I can't even imagine. Talk about a prolific writing career.
Yeah.
There. Wow.
She was busy.
She was busy. She was busy. So let's talk a little bit more about the actual Secret Garden book.
Sure.
Now, I grew up thinking that this was a book for kids. I actually featured it, on a blog post and a podcast a while ago of some of the children's books I thought all adults needed to read. And I remember talking to you, and you said, well, actually, this was a book that was written for adults, which, I love, because I think adults need to read children's literature, but I also love knowing that a book like this was purposely written to get adults to think. But for those maybe that haven't read it yet, or they've read it and it was a while ago and we need to refresh the memory, can you just give a synopsis, an overview of the book and why you think, and a lot of people agree, that it's still so relevant today?
Yes, absolutely. But can I go back really quick? It's interesting because, books back then, there wasn't a children's category, right? So when I say it wasn't written for children, it's because there wasn't a kids book section, right? Books were written you typically, and the Secret Garden was the same. It was written in magazine form, right? It came out a chapter, and then it was put into a book form. And so so books weren't necessarily written specifically. The children's genre kind of came after her. And so when I say that, I mean that. But what I think she was so good about doing is that the cool thing that she did with not only The Secret Garden, but also really one of her most famous books during her lifetime, which was Little Lord Fauntleroy, was that she made the child, the hero of the story. Whereas so many of the books of the past, it was always the adults that were the rescuers. It was the adults that were that. And so she really did that. But yeah, for those who have not read The Secret Garden, and listen, don't feel bad, because I'm about to confess to you that I was 38 when I read The Secret Garden for the first time. Which sounds completely crazy, I know, but I grew up in the movie generation, right? So there were already movies. So that was my first introduction to The Secret Garden. And then my mother gave speeches about Frances everywhere. And it was like, I think I kind of took the attitude that I already knew the story, and, what did I need to do? But the reality is there's a time and place for everything, and there's a season for everything. And I needed to read it when I needed to read it. And we can talk more about that in a minute. But let me give you the brief synopsis. And I don't think I've ever been asked to do a synopsis of The Secret Garden before. So I don't want to give any spoiler alerts.
Right. We appreciate that.
Yes. But in essence, it's a story about a girl who lost her parents tragically, and to cholera, and she is sent to live with her uncle in England, and in this big, huge mansion where she comes across many characters. One being her cousin, who has some physical ailments. Her uncle, who has her uncle and her cousin have just suffered a loss of her aunt, and the father, out of grief, locked up this garden. And it's so hard. I don't even know how to describe this story, except for to say that Mary and this garden and all of the loss and the grief that everyone is feeling, really, I always tell people that The Secret Garden is about, hope and loss being turned, fear and loss being turned on its head by hope and magic. And it's the magic of nature. It's the magic going to work every day and enlisting your friends and pulling weeds and pulling the weeds that are the thoughts in your mind that are keeping you locked up and locked away, like the secret garden was. And it's really, it's a timeless story. You asked, like, why is it still here today? There are very few books out there that really cross generations. Like, you can hand this book to a 70-year-old and you can hit it to a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
And they will all find what they need when they need it. It's also I think it's one of the most reread books also.
Yeah, I will agree with that. I actually read it as a child. I can't remember how old I was. And I know that I didn't take away then what I took away when I reread the book as an adult. I thought, wait a minute, did I actually read this book? Because as a kid, I did not get what the true essence of the book was about, like the transformation that takes place in the characters and that ultimately can take place in the reader. That's not what I took away at, say, 9 or 10, but it is what I took away, as a 40-something-year-old. So, and I agree with you, no matter the age, you can take something, but it's something that is just universal, that when you need it, you see something different inside the pages.
Yeah, I always say that I believe that Frances. So, well, I believe that Frances tucked seeds into every single page in the Secret Garden. And one of the things you have to understand about the Secret Garden is that it was written much later in her writing career. It was written in those last really 7 years of her life, which means that for any author, like Frances used to say, she takes a slice off of someone every single day. When she looks at characters and things like that, she's always grabbing thoughts and ideas, etc. But this is, and most of her books came as a quick download. She will tell you that the stories would come, she would sit, and it would just flow out of her. But The Secret Garden was one of the few that she said she had been writing in her mind for a very, very long time. And so The Secret Garden is really a culmination of what she had kind of learned throughout her life. It was what she had learned through grief and loss of her son, the grief and loss of 2 husbands that she married and divorced, and bringing her own garden back to life. What she believed about the power of the mind and thoughts and nature, and her love of roses, and all the things really got kind of put together into this book. And I think that's where the power is it's all her lessons and learnings that she just wrapped up really beautifully in a bow for this book.
Yeah. And when I think of the book, I think of kind of a couple of parallel themes, and you just captured one of them. One of them is kind of that literal nature garden. What does it take to grow, to live, to survive, to thrive? But then you have this spiritual kind of garden of your thoughts, the positivity, the getting out the negative thoughts, the abundance, all of the things that the world is talking about right now in this moment, right? To make our lives
Right.
better, were in this book that was published long ago. And so that's what really struck me as I read it recently. Those two, you have the literal and the spiritual, but the lesson she's teaching in that book are what today's gurus are teaching out in the world, which is just fascinating. It's fascinating. And of course, I love to read. So I just love getting what you call the seeds.
Yeah.
On every page. I love marking up a book. I got a problem writing on a book, but I put sticky notes on it, and I've got my book darts and my book flags and all of those things, because I am a quote collector.
Yes.
Love them. It's the quotes that really speak to me, that make me stop, that make me think, that ultimately send me to my notebook. And one of my favorite ways recently to notebook beyond my morning pages and some of the other methods is to pull the quotes that I loved that made me stop from the books that I'm reading. And I know you love this too,
I do.
because in your podcast, which you haven't mentioned yet, so you're going to have to, but in
Yeah,
your podcast, you bring in these quotes
I
from
do.
the Secret Garden as these beautiful launching points for the conversations that you have with guests. And so first, I want you to tell them about the podcast. And
Yeah.
second, I would love if you can share one of those favorite seeds or quotes from the Secret Garden that really speak to you.
So I call those heart taps, uh,
That's right.
because I feel like and I think it happens when you're listening to a speaker or when you're reading, and there are those times when your literally heart like kind of like taps a little bit and goes like, that's for you, right? And sometimes like I have been in a place listening to a speaker and I have turned around like, did everybody else know that what they just said was right there for me? It's that same moment where you're like, oh, I gotta write that down.
Yes.
And so yeah, I love that. But yes, so I have a podcast. It's called The Well Tended Life. And really everything I do right now is based off the life lessons that are tucked inside the Secret Garden. And all of those quotes become really a jumping off point to talk about a bunch of different things, like pulling the weeds in our own life and mental health and positivity and struggling and all the things. And really, I do some solo episodes and I do mostly interviews because I believe in pulling the wisdom from others and getting what I like to call weed whacking advice
Yes, I love that.
from those who are growing and blooming in their own right. I think it's important to do that. And I always tell people on the Well Tended Life, it's like really I'm doing this for me because I need to learn and continue to learn how to tend to my own life in order to do the things that I know that I'm being called to do. But and I just get to pull everybody else along with me and talk about those things. So super fun. Go check it out. But as far as quotes, it's so hard. This is like asking me to like pick my favorite child.
Yes.
Which I have a boy and a girl, and every night growing up, I always told each of my kids, "I love you, good night, you're my favorite. Don't tell your brother." And then I'd go in and I'd tell her, "I love you, good night. Don't tell your sister." Right? So I can do it, but some of my favorite Secret Garden quotes are probably the biggest one for me is always where you tend a rose, a thistle cannot grow.
That's
Right?
mine. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
I love it.
Although it's funny, I had somebody say the other day when I had posted it because I also love thistles, right? They're so cool and they're amazing, and they're so pretty when they bloom, and the bees love them, and all the things. So I really have nothing against thistles as far as this is concerned. But the whole point is that like where your focus goes, things grow, right? And if you're focused on the thistle, it's going to choke out everything else. But if you're focused on tending the rose, which for me the rose is can be symbolic of a million different things, but really the rose is you, where you tend your life. The weeds are going to be less likely to come in. It doesn't mean that there won't be weeds, because there will be weeds, right? We all have weeds. That's kind of it's a truth. And for me, weeds are the things that are popping up on a regular basis that are keeping you from growing the things that you were meant to grow. And weeds will always pop up. They just have to be managed. So it's about identifying what those weeds are and pulling them when they're little. So for me, like one of my biggest weeds is busyness, right? And I know when they start popping up because I start to feel overwhelmed, I'm short-tempered, I'm exhausted, and then I have to just take one look at my calendar and go, oh, there they are, right? And I need to manage these better. they probably will never one day be eradicated, because I'm sure you and your listeners, how many times have you said, how am I here again?
Yes.
Like, how is this thing popped up
Unfortunately, again? Yes.
Yeah. So like, you just make peace with it. Like, weeds are a part of it, but I'm going to continue to tend to all of those other things to keep them at bay, and to keep them from overwhelming.
Yeah.
So I love that one.
Yeah.
One of my other favorites is, she was making herself stronger by fighting with the wind.
Yeah.
And so many, because for me, so many times we fear resistance, and we forget that really it's that resistance and the hard things that help us to grow and make us stronger. And so I just love that idea, of that visual.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a laundry list of quotes in my quote notebook. The one that really jumped out at me recently, recently meaning not when I was, 9, when I read this one as adult. And I will probably get it a little wrong because the dialect, that is in the book, but
I can never do it.
Yeah, he said, you said the magic was in my back. The doctor calls it rheumatics, right? And I just thought, there it is. What is it? Is it a gift? Is it an illness? That just really hit me hard because of my own personal issues I'm dealing with. And it was, the whole book is just this invitation to question your mindset, I think, in so many ways. And all three of those quotes right there really encourage to do that.
Well, and there's a quote, something that's talking about, like, the magic isn't in the spade itself. The magic is in me, right? It's in the activity. It's you have the power inside to decide. And that's for me. The other quote is, mere thoughts are as powerful as electric batteries, as good for one as sunlight is, or as bad for one as poison. And like, we get to choose our thoughts. I think it's Dr. Wayne Dyer. He talks about, like, you think of your thoughts as like a conveyor belt as they're going by. And like, you get to decide, do you want to pick up the negative one and hold on to that one? Or do you want to put that one back and pick up the positive one? We get to choose what we fill ourselves with.
Yeah. That's very powerful, and yet also very hard.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Choosing.
Well, and for me, that's the other lesson in The Secret Garden, is that, the secret garden didn't bloom and grow again because of magic. It bloomed and grew again because of hard work.
Yeah.
Right. Because Mary chose to every day get up, put the key in, turn the door, open it up, pull the weeds, do the work, enlist her friends. She chose to come rain or shine, in order to make it grow. And that's the thing that most self-help books don't tell you, is that, it's all hard work.
Yeah.
It's, the heart work is hard. The head work is hard. The physical work is hard. But it's that resistance, that makes us stronger.
Yeah. Which leads me into the next thing I'm hoping you're going to talk about, because you talk on your podcast and on your social media channels, which we'll put all the links into the show notes. But for you, there's a particular kind of journaling that helps do this kind of work. And you already mentioned, weed whacking advice, which will you talk about the journaling method you've arrived at that's kind of based on your own experience? It's based on The Secret Garden. I love it. You've taught me a couple of things to really enhance my own journaling, and you use highlighters and colorful things, which just makes life better. So will you tell everyone about that particular journaling style that you have? Because I know they're going to love it and get something away from it.
Well, and let me go back and tell you why when I started journaling. So I did kind of the same thing you did, which was, I would read something and I would write down just a quote from what I read every single day. And I actually was doing this style of journaling when I read The Secret Garden for the very first time. And at night, I was reading The Secret Garden, and in the morning, I was doing my journal time, and the themes kept being very, very similar. It was almost like direct correlations, and it was like, okay, there's some connection between this time that I was spending in my journal and the seeds and the thoughts and the lessons that I was learning in The Secret Garden. And so, and what I learned in The Secret Garden when I read it at 38 was that my life looked like the abandoned, locked up version of The Secret Garden. Like many, I was in that over busy, trying to prove myself mode. I had taken on way too many commitments, and I was starting to wither, and my family was starting to wither with me. And so I knew something had to change. I knew I needed to find a different way to deal with life. And so you can go to my podcast and you can go to my social media and see a lot of those things. But my journaling process evolved as I began to really understand what it meant to tend to me, right? To live a well-tended life. And so I guess what I'm saying is it's evolved, right? All journaling processes evolve, and it's continuing to evolve. Even what it looks like today, it looks different than it did even 2 years ago. So I always like to caution anybody I tell about journaling, because you get to choose what works for you. I'm just going to give you the idea of what I do on a daily basis. And I call it a life tending journal. For me, it's more of like a gardener's notebook, right? It really is more of a way. It's not a true journal. So I don't write down what I ate that day. I don't just free write. It's very purposeful, and I'm looking for very specific things. So when I sit down in my journal, I basically, every single day, I read, I reflect, and I weed, and I seed, and I water. So what that looks like is, and sometimes I do them in different order, right? Sometimes like I sit down and I'm like, I need to write down what my weeds were yesterday, because this is the big thing. But typically I do it in this order, because the first thing I always want to do is I want to put good things in, right? So the word is read, but some days that looks like meditation. Sometimes that looks like a song that was on my heart when I woke up in the morning. Sometimes it looks like a devotional that I'm reading. Sometimes it's just a quote that comes to mind. But the first thing I do is I want to consume something that is good for me. And I write down what I call heart taps, right? When I write things down, I write them in big letters, little letters. I leave little extra room, because I always, once a week, I go back and read back through as well. And sometimes I take extra notes. So I kind of have that piece. But so I read, and then I reflect. I believe in looking back. I don't believe in living in the past, but I do believe in looking back to notice the joy, goodness, and growth in every single day, because it's always there. I have been doing this process for probably this way for about 5 years. And not once have I got to the reflect section and not found joy in the day before, not found goodness that I'm grateful for, and not found growth. And what that does for me is that solidifies my hope mode, right? I can walk into any day, any situation, and know, because I've proven it, and I continue to prove it every single day, that there will be joy, there will be goodness, and there will be growth. It's there. And I've trained my eyes to see it. and that's a part of it, right? It's kind of the thought process of maybe a gratitude journal, but gratitude journal just never really worked for me. I don't know why. So I write down one thing that brings me joy. Usually, like sometimes it's, the flowers that I saw. Sometimes it's a funny joke. Sometimes it's an America's Funniest Home Video. Like it can be whatever, but usually those are those things that are just like quick, like made me laugh out loud, or like right now, one of the things that is bringing me joy is my shark vacuum, my little robot shark vacuum. I can't tell you, like y'all can't see on this podcast, but my face is lit up with joy. Every morning she comes out, I greet her and I thank her for coming in and taking care of our family. And I love her. I love my shark. It is bringing me so much joy, right? This is the season I'm in, people. This is the season I'm in. Right? So that's joy. And then goodness is something really deeper. Goodness is something that I'm grateful for, right? Sometimes it's my health. It just kind of depends on what's kind of going on in that season. And then goodness, joy, goodness, and then growth. So growth is harder because growth happens so slowly, right? But sometimes growth for me is not necessarily, it might be a page read. It might be a word not said, right? Maybe I would have said something snarky back or whatever it was. Sometimes growth is like, good girl, you kept your mouth closed today,
Right.
or growth might be, I made it 4 miles. I wanted to go 6, but I still made it 4, right? Whatever it happens to be, there is always a little bit of growth. But I will say that is actually always the harder one to find, because sometimes you got to dig around and recognize that growth doesn't look the same for everyone by any stretch of the imagination. So that's reflect. So we read and then I reflect. I look back quickly, and really that doesn't take neither one. Like usually I read part takes me maybe 15 minutes. Reflect is like not even 5. Like it's quick, right? I'm not trying to, and I don't write paragraphs, right? This is literally like 1 or 2 pages total. And then I weed. So weeding for me is looking back on the day before and noticing where some of my weeds might be popping up, and for me, that's, what are the symptoms of my weeds, knowing what my weeds are. And, it can look like a million different things. For me, like I said, busyness is my biggest weed that I'm constantly having to be on the lookout for. So, and it's really more of, you have to be careful, because I think sometimes, some people may think, oh, this is it's negative. It's not, it's not negative. I'm putting them on notice. It's almost like, hey, I see you, be careful. These are getting out of control. It's me continuing to maintain vigilant awareness of it. And then many times I'll just write like, do better tomorrow, or maybe take 2 things out, like some sort of strategy to make sure that I'm continuing to pull those weeds. And there's always a weed. I mean, there's always one from the day before. Anyways, and then weed, and then seed. So seed is the next one. Seed are the things that I want to grow. And sometimes that list is 2 things. Sometimes that list is 10 things for me. But one of the things that I do when I write down seeds, it's the what I want to grow and the why, right? So let's just say I am I am a sorry, I'm trying to like give you one, but without giving you mine necessarily. Like right. I want to be fit and healthy so that I can play volleyball with my daughter, right? Because I think a lot of times when we're trying to grow something or do something or change something, the what isn't enough unless it's connected to the why.
Yeah.
I think it's almost like the why is the fertilizer for the seed.
Yeah.
It's the reason that you'll hold on and do things past when you want to give up.
Yeah.
So I write those every day, or sometimes I'll just write them and then I'll just read through them in my process, depending on kind of what I have time wise. And then the last one is water. And really for me, watering is what do I intentionally want to pour into today? It's my intention setting. So read, reflect, weed, seed, and water is really my process. So
I love it. I love it. So I've talked on the podcast before. I am a morning pager. So
yes.
I get up and I will just write and write and write. And so often though, I don't really like what I see, right? Because morning pages are to get things off of your mind and heart and onto the page. And that's really wonderful. But when you're consistently talking about something that maybe doesn't feel great or is on your mind and heart for a reason, and they're usually on there because it isn't this wonderful, happy thing, sometimes you can leave a session feeling great. And sometimes you're like, did I really write about that again? But
Right.
this method, these 5 things that you do, read, reflect, weed, seed, and water, I can imagine you must feel really good at the end of the watering when it is time to start your day, which I'm not saying morning pages doesn't help you do that, but this is a very intentional way of setting your day that I have not tried. I've played around with your weed idea because that actually is my favorite part of the whole process is just, I love what you said. Let's just put those things on notice so that we don't forget about them. But I love how you just must start the day ready, like ready to just take it on.
Yeah. Well, and for me, the other big thing is that a life tending journal is about you, right? It's not about what so and so said or what so and so did. It's about this. It's about me. This process is about me and me only. So those are the things that aren't in here, right? Matter of fact, I've had people that are like, well, what if somebody looks at your journal? Well, you know what? They're going to see that I'm working on myself, that I have things that I struggle with. But what they're not going to see in here is that, Julie Baker said something not nice to me or whatever in here, or because there's nobody else in here except for me. It's just me.
Yeah. And you said on one of your social posts recently, I can't remember which one, but I watched it and then I watched it and then I watched it because you said something about putting yourself first, that we have to do that. And it takes a lot of people a long time to figure that out, but you have to do that in order to be there for everybody else. And I just kept, like refreshing the feed, like, okay, I gotta listen to that again. I gotta listen to
it. Yeah. And you're worth it. You're worth it.
Right. Yeah. And your notebook is this beautiful reminder that you are worth it.
Well, and so, you talked about color, right?
Yes.
So one of the things I also do, and I, like I said, I don't look back and stay there. I'm not one to stay in the past and all of that kind of stuff. But here's what I do know is sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes I need to be told things more than one time in order for it to sink in. And I know that I have gotten to an end of a week, still in tears, still upset about whatever. And I started this process of reading back the entire week on Sundays. So I do this journal process Monday through Saturday. And then on Sundays, I grab a handful of markers and my journal, and I go and I sit and I read everything I wrote from the week before. And on that particular week, every single day when I read, the word was rest, 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 rest. But yet somehow on Sunday, I'm still exhausted. And, but I read it and I was like, how did I miss that? Right. But finally on Sunday, it sunk in. So I love going back and doing this process. So I read And then I take my markers to the things that I know my heart needs to hear again. And then I circle words that are being repeated, because that's the other thing you don't see unless you look back. You don't see that there's a pattern. I bet if you looked back in your morning pages, you would also see a very similar thing. So it's a cool process, to go back and do. And I underline and, and I write. Honestly, it's not a pretty journal. I write like a 2-year-old. It's chicken scratch.
Oh, no. I'm interrupting you there because I was just going to say, people need to go on your social feed because you do put little snippets, and I love your pages because I can see the process. Like I can see how this is a tool. I could see your markers, your circles, your stars, your smile, whatever they are. That's the process I love to see. And by the way, I really love that big, thick green hardcover notebook that you're holding up. I know listeners can't see it.
So listen,
but I'm a little jealous right now.
It's a cheat. It is a gray notebook, and I hate gray. Even though it is a book cover, it's like literally one of those, just like, a matter of fact, it's covered right now currently in coffee stains. And so I need to throw it in the washer. But it's just one of those, like, from, Office Depot or whatever.
I wouldn't have guessed that. Okay.
I know. Anyway, so yeah, it's not anything, because I don't know about you, but I have a very particular journal.
Oh, yes.
And I always tell people that too, when you're starting out journaling, your supplies matter. Yes. And it sounds so silly, but it's kind of like, if you're going to go work out, you want to wear something that you're comfortable in and you feel good in, and that fits right, and all the things. And it's the same thing. This is like a daily workout. Like, you want it to feel good in your hand. You want it to open up the weight. Like, one that's too hard for me, because I usually sit on a couch or out on the patio. I need something that has a little bit of flexibility to it. I don't like a hard journal, but somebody else may be like, I like a hard journal. I like the lines this way. And then, even my pen, like, I will spend 20 minutes in the morning looking for the silly pen, because I like the way it writes. I like the way it feels in my hand. If it's a scratchy pen, I'm out, and it makes me upset. It's so silly.
It is not silly. It is not silly. You have found your people in this podcast, Keri. We talk about these things on an almost weekly basis inside my community, so we get it.
Yeah. And if it's not working for you, like, get rid of it and start another one.
Right.
Like, don't waste, I don't know, like, it's like the whole, like, do you continue to read through a book that you really hate? Like, do you really want to spend your time doing that? Like, let it go, move on to something else, and find what works for you.
Right. So for listeners who want to dive into this notebooking method, I know you have something they can download. You give them the template.
Yes.
You have tools. Where can they find you? Where can they find your podcast? Where can they find more about journaling so that they can jump right in?
Yeah, I've got a free life tending journal template. It's on my website, which is thewelltendedlife.com. But it's also in the links in my bio on Instagram and Facebook. I am on Facebook, but I spend most of my time on Instagram. So that's probably the best place to find me. But so I do have just a quick template up, but I'm actually working on a course right now that will be a much deeper dive into each one of those. Because really, I mean, helping you identify what your weeds are, and helping you, spot where joy, goodness, and growth is, and all the things. So my hope is that will be out by the first part of the year, is my goal at this point.
Kicking off a brand new year, ready.
Yes.
Ready to go.
Yeah.
Journaling. Oh, wonderful. Well, I'll include all of those links in the show notes, so they can just do a quick one click and get your Instagram, the website, especially that journal outline. I love it. And I'm definitely going to do it a little bit more. I've been stealing your weed idea, and I certainly have your read and reflect idea, but I need to change up my morning journaling routine so that I start the day on a better note. And I think your sequence is just the perfect way to do that. So I'm gonna give that a try more regularly, and I'll
Awesome.
bug you and let you know how it goes, and
Yeah.
share it with the community as well. Thank
Awesome.
you so much. I'm so glad we finally got to
I know.
talk about the book, talk about your journaling method, and now my listeners hopefully will come find you and just add this as another technique to their journaling, and hopefully either read or more likely go reread in whatever season of life you're in right now. Reread that book because you'll find whatever it is looking for you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Blessings and blooms, everyone.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Get Literate podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. Plus, if you want more, you might like to join my Patreon community. There, you'll find additional inspiration for your reading and writing life, like bonus podcast episodes, bibliotherapy book calendars, monthly book clubs, notebooking challenges, live events, giveaways, and much, much more. It's only $5 a month, and you get instant access to all of the previous content too. You can learn more at getliterate.co. And one more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish and notebookish community too. Thanks for listening.